Hello and welcome back to Logan Sounds Off, and today I am very excited to be chatting to a punk folk poet who is not only an incredible musician but an author as well. I'm super excited to be chatting to Billy Bragg. How
I'm
are you,
good,
Billy?
Logan. How are you?
I'm doing
Good, good.
fantastic, thanks
Just a
for
quick word
asking.
to your viewers. If you hear any extraneous noise, we've got the roofers in today putting tiles on our roof outside, and I'm on the first floor and they're just over there. So I apologise for any clunking or profanity they may issue forth when they drop a tile or something.
Hopefully we'll be able to get some noise reduction tech on this interview and try and take a bit of that out. But before we get into our conversation, Billy, I'd like to ask, for those who don't know you, could you tell us a little bit about
Sure, yeah.
yourself?
I was born in East London in 1957. I left school when I was 16. The town I grew up in, Barking and Dagenham, I was educated to work at the Ford Motor Company. I have a huge plant there, and everybody's parents worked there. I didn't fancy that, so I thought as a way of escaping, I'd become a rock and roll star. So I started playing guitar and had some really boring jobs. But then, when I was 19 years old, punk rock happened, and in the fabulous moment of do it yourself, I was able to get a record away with my little band, Riff Raff, on Chiswick Records. So I got a whiff of the music industry. That kind of fell apart, and it took me a few years to get back to a way of playing music. But I came up with something more interesting to me, which is a way of playing solo with an electric guitar. And at the time, nobody had really done this. When my first record came out in 1983, most of the music being played at the time was synthesizer duo. So it was like, Pet Shop Boys or Soft Cell, that sort of stuff. I was the absolute opposite of that. And sometimes, if everyone's zigging and you zag, you can kind of get some attention. And that's exactly what I did. And since then, I've been working as a musician. I feel very proud that since I was 25 years old, I haven't had to work for anybody else, and I feel really fortunate in that, to have a job in which I can make a living doing something I really love doing. What a lucky so and so I am.
It's actually amazing though, your discography, Billy, and the large array of stuff that you've done, and your story as well is fantastic. And starting off at the very, very start, you mentioned there you lived in Barking, and I read that some of your songwriting inspirations included Bob Dylan and Simon and Garfunkel. And as a young kid who hasn't started songwriting before, is just about to pick up the guitar, what was it about their music that really impacted you and started you off as a
I think it
songwriter?
was the stories in it. Particularly the song that first got me when I was about 11 years old was "The Boxer" by Simon and Garfunkel, and there was just something wondrous about the sound of it and the storytelling. I really was into the whole singer-songwriter thing, and through Simon and Garfunkel, I got into Dylan and other singer-songwriters around that time. And if you're going to start writing a song and you need to have something to write about and you don't have your own experiences, and obviously as a 12, 13 year old I didn't have much experience, being able to riff off the way they told stories and work out how to do that was really, really helpful to my development. And of course, later on, after punk rock, the idea of being alone on stage with a guitar was really attractive to me, because I thought back to that, Bob Dylan image. Because I really liked his political stuff. I really liked, he made an album called The Times They Are Changing in 1963, I think. And I didn't hear it until 1973, but it had a real impression on me.
Wow, that's really, really cool. And I think though that whole idea of you tracing back to songwriters and playing solo with the electric guitar, where I was listening to Life's a Riot and just listening to that, I was going like, it's so raw, that sound. It sounds familiar, but you put a whole twist on it. And I thought that was really, really interesting. And one of the one of the aspects of that punk rock twist that you added was the poetic aspect, which I understand started off your interest in poetry when you were 12 and when you were asked to read something on the radio by your teacher. Could you tell us about that
Sure.
experience and what it led to as a fan of
Well,
poetry?
it's really, I mean, we all write poetry at school, don't we, Logan? I mean, it's one of those things you have to do every now and then. There's a teacher doesn't turn up and the replacement teacher comes in, they're a PE teacher, and you've got to write, everyone has to write a poem because they're trying to think of something to fill the time. So I wrote a poem, And just handed it in, and my teacher wrote to my parents to ask if I'd copied it from a book, which I thought was a bit strange. We didn't have any books of poetry in our house. And then they liked it so much, they got me to read it out on local radio. And this was a huge boost for my confidence. I thought, this is the sort of thing a 12-year-old singer-songwriter should be doing. And subsequently, I failed all of my exams except English language, which I took 6 months early and got a grade A. So that kind of like seemed to me, if you're going to be a singer-songwriter, you really only need one qualification, probably English language. The reason why I failed all my other exams was I was madly in love with this girl from another school in that summer and couldn't do my exams, but I got a lot of great songs out of it. So win some, lose some.
Fair enough. And I mean, that kind of poetic aspect of your music really carried through with like The Milkman of Human Kindness, the opening track on that record, which is one of my personal favourites of yours. And kind of tracing back to that time when you were 12, you were getting into poetry, obviously this massive boost of confidence. At the same time, you and your friend Philip Wigg were starting to learn how to play the guitar. And for a singer-songwriter, was that inspired by Bob Dylan? And how did you find, or Simon and Garfunkel, and how did you find playing the guitar?
Well, I was writing songs long before I learned to play an instrument and just keeping the tunes in my head. So learning to play was really, really important. And the thing about Dylan, not so much Simon and Garfunkel, but about Dylan, all of his earlier stuff that I really, really liked was mostly just three chords. You know, it was a C, an F and a G7. I bought a couple of songbooks in the West End. Me and Wiggy used to go up to West End and buy... Well, he taught me to play from the Rod Stewart songbook, basically. That's how I learned to play. He was a real big fan of the Faces and Rod Stewart, and he could already play, and he got the Rod Stewart songbook, and I had a rudimentary idea of chords, and we learned those songs. But then I got hold of a Bob Dylan songbook, and I realised that all these songs were just three chords mostly, and that again was really, it was accessible to me. It was like folk music, I suppose. Although Dylan isn't, I don't think Dylan is folk music or Simon and Garfunkel is, but it was like a music that was around at the time that was accessible to me. Because I was growing up listening to, obviously music on Radio 1. And so it led me to start writing loads of songs. But the weird thing was I didn't write a Billy Bragg song until I was about 21 years old. All the rest of the time I was writing songs that were based on one of the artists that I was really into at the time. So, the Faces, the Stones, the Who, Dylan, obviously. That's how you learn to play. Are you started writing songs yet, or are you thinking about it?
I mean, I haven't wrote lyrics, but I have done a lot of songs. I know I released some music on Bandcamp, but I'm not too proud of it now. So I'm working on stuff currently at the moment that I want to release properly as a proper full-on release. So
always good to get stuff out there and find out how people feel about it. I think that do you ever do open mics or anything like that?
No, I actually haven't. I mean, around where I live, it's pretty minimal, the music scene regarding young people. I mean, I do a thing called Music Generation, which is a brilliant initiative that they have over in Ireland where musicians can get together. There's a rock and pop ensemble that I play in. There's also a jazz ensemble and different things across in the different counties in Ireland, which is amazing. And I think that's really kind of where I get humbled by some fantastic musicians.
Yeah, you need that.
That's where I kind of get some experience.
Yeah, you need that kind of support. When I read in the papers or see on TV about the problems that young men face, without wishing to be patronising, talking to you, Logan, but about, glomming onto Andrew Tate and stuff like that. I think what they lack is a peer group that gives them some support. And the thing about Wiggy and Robert round the corner who played the drums and Rice who played the keyboards, they were my support group. So when I was going through those difficult times in adolescence, trying to work out who I was and why I wasn't one of those blokes who went down the pub and pulled birds and drunk beer and got in fights and all that, I wasn't that guy. I never could be that guy. But my friends in that little group who sat in my mum's back room and we played songs, they made me feel like I was someone. This is who I was. And I think that is really important, to find that, to be able to go and do something you love doing with other people. It doesn't have to be music, whatever it is. You might be playing football, might be playing chess, might be anything. But to have that, when you're going through your adolescence, to have a peer group support like that and keep you away from nasty people like Andrew Tate. I think it's absolutely crucial to have that sort of thing. So I'm really glad to hear you doing that, mate.
Oh, thank you so much. And honestly, Music Generation, it's really really cool. Just for me, who's super into music, like I don't mind making music by myself, but it's also nice to go out, meet other musicians, and learn how to ask, what's that
Yeah,
chord? Learn how to play on stage with different people. It's really really cool, and it's very interesting as well for me, who's somebody who's regarding music works a lot of the
yeah,
time by myself. So it's nice to work with other younger musicians.
crucial,
And speaking of
crucial, absolutely crucial.
younger
Yeah,
musicians starting to make music, Riff
yeah.
Raff, how did the band begin?
Hanging around in my mum's back room, we sort of like Wiggy came in, and then there was a kid round the corner. Wiggy was a couple of years younger than me, and there was a kid round the corner who was a year older, and we all went to the same schools, and we all knew each other. And he played drums, so he started coming around and playing drums with us. And we never really got a solid bass player until the late 70s, really, until 77. But we were just basically staying up all night, drinking cans of beer and playing rock and roll. And eventually, when we got too loud for my mum's back room, we went and rented a rehearsal studio down on the A13 where we could stay up all night over the weekend, and we did that. And as I say, it was like a gang of friends trying to deal with the strange transition between school and work. That was the period. It was really crucial. And I think though that to have something like that really does help to be able to compare notes, whether it's about chords or tunes or lyrics or what happened to me at work today. It was really, really helped my development.
Yeah, I understand that, and I think it's really really interesting though hearing your story with being in a band, and kind of it's not just a band of musicians, but it's a band of people, and I think that's really really important. And I don't think people keep that in mind when they're listening to their favorite
I must
band,
say,
their
I
favorite
must say,
musicians.
Logan, I didn't realise this at the time, mate. It's only looking back now and reading about, you when you grow up needing the support of your peers or a father figure, or I look at all these things that people talk about that young men are missing now, and I think to myself, that was Riffraff. That's what we did for each other, and we still do. I mean, I still see Wiggy and Bob and everybody, Ricey. They're my dearest friends, really, in many ways, because they come from a time so far away now. My father died when I was 18, so they kind of, there's not many people around who knew my dad. Obviously my partner, my family, none of them knew my dad, but those guys, I go back a long way with them, and when I get together with them, it's really important to me, that part of my relationship.
Yeah, I think that's really really important, and it gives me, who's a fan of your music, insight into you playing in a band, because from playing in a band, Riff Raff stopped making music. You then began playing as Spy versus Spy, or your solo career now today. Um, how did you find this new dynamic of playing with the whole band to now playing by yourself with an electric guitar?
Well, I did still have in my mind the idea of the singer-songwriter, the individual on stage who's making sense of the world in a way that is, not blasting it out, not making loud music, that because I came through punk rock, so the idea of loud fast music was powerful. This was the kind of opposite. This was drawing people in, and nobody had been doing that for a while. But it needed to have some edge. I think if I'd have gone out playing an acoustic guitar with the same songs, I would never have got through, because they would have said, mate, you should go and play in the folk clubs. But because I had an electric guitar, I could play in the pubs and the clubs, and I could open for rock bands. And that gave me a little way in to get myself an audience. So the electric guitar was really crucial. And it kind of taught me a lot, really, because with an electric guitar, the way I play it, it's much more percussive, because I was in Riff Raff, I was the rhythm guitar player. And if you listen to live recordings of us, you'll only really notice what I play when I stop playing, and there's a hole. And then you don't really notice what I'm going. But I have a very strong sense of rhythm. So with the electric guitar, I'm playing a rather percussive rhythmic guitar. when I'm doing the melody with my voice, and I had to kind of adapt that to that style of playing. But it really worked for me. Pretty soon, people were paying attention. I came along at just about the right time.
Yeah, and I think that kind of sound has really inspired a lot of people. That kind of folk punk
Yeah,
sound. And for me, who's a big fan of punk, it's actually a genre that I'm quite new to, and I'm still discovering artists. Like my introduction to folk punk was Patrick Fitzgerald when he worked with Jello
yeah,
Biafra, and the Punch single, the 7 inch that was released a couple of years ago, when Donald Trump was either running for presidency or was president, that it was a protest song that Patrick and Jello Biafra and Motorcycle realigned for America. And to hear Patrick Fitzgerald singing Punch, I was just like, it's amazing how like punk isn't just for most people they would think of it as screaming
yeah.
or electric guitar. It's not. It's the energy that's
Or worse
brought.
than that, Logan, they
Punk
think of it
energy.
as a haircut or a pair of wacky trousers. Punk, really, the essence of punk is do it yourself. That's what punk taught me. If you want to do something, don't wait for someone to come along and say, would you like to play music? You've got to go out and do it yourself. And I've lived my life by that ethos ever since I was 19 years old. And you're a good example of that, Logan, because I bet nobody asked you if you wanted to do a podcast thing, did they? You kind of had the vibe to do it, and you got up there and done it. So that's pretty punk rock in my book.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it's kind of, in my case, I mean, I wouldn't consider it punk. It was just more something that I felt I had to do
DIY.
as a music fan.
DIY,
I
mate. Yeah,
just kind of wanted
that's
to.
it.
I wanted to do it, and I ran with it. My parents said maybe let's shift from just being a YouTube channel to also having the podcast platform, and I
Yeah,
just kept
yeah.
running with it,
And that's
and
it.
here we are
That's the
now.
spirit of punk, mate. Do it yourself. Don't wait for RTE to knock on your door or anyone, Just get out there and do it. More power to you, boy.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much, and with now as well. So let's come to the stage where the record's
yeah,
out. Life's a Riot with Spy versus
yeah.
Spy, which was getting a lot of acclaim and caught the attention of Kirsty MacColl, who is a beautiful singer, and she covered in New England. So, how did you react when you heard that Kirsty wanted to cover the
I
track?
was very, very happy because I was a big fan of Kirsty. She had, when I worked in that, we were talking earlier, I mentioned working in a record shop for a while. She put out a record on before her Stiff record days on, I think it was on Polydor, the one that had there's a guy works down the chip shop, swears he's Elvis, and I just thought she was a brilliant, brilliant songwriter, as well as being an incredible singer and a lovely person. So I was absolutely, I mean, I couldn't imagine. I thought, why is such a great songwriter? I want to cover one of my songs. But she did such an amazing thing with it, and I was just blown away and really, really proud that I have that association with her.
Yeah, I mean, for me, who sees covers coming out and stuff, some covers are a bit tasteless, but her cover was so tasteful and really complemented your track. And even though yours was out before, your track complemented hers. It's really, really interesting for me, who didn't live through that period of it being
Yeah.
released and seeing the progression of the track. For me now, looking back, I find it so creative and so inspiring seeing that cover. Um, and I want to speak about an amazing performance that you did, which was after Life's a Riot, and that's when you released the EP Between the Wars, which which brought you to be on Top of the Pops, where you played the title track. How did you find performing on the Top of the Pops with your music? Was it just something that you kind of took in your stride, or was it quite an impactful moment in your
It's a
life?
hugely impactful moment, Logan, when you've grown up watching Top of the Pops as I had. It was the absolute, to me, this was it. I was finally arrived now. All the things that I always wanted to do, this is kind of it now. Not only have I got on Top of the Pops, but I've got on Top of the Pops playing a political song that I'm actually going to physically perform live. I'm on Top of the Pops on my own terms, surrounded by these people with wacky haircuts and bright shining clothes and all this kind of weirdness. And here I am bringing some politics into it. I felt very proud about that. Very proud.
It truly was a fantastic feat on your own with an electric
Yeah.
guitar, playing a really inspiring political track in front of, as you said, these really interesting
Yeah,
people.
it was wacky. I think Nick Kershaw was on just before me, and then Sarah Brightman singing P.A. Jesu after me. I'm like, this is pretty strange, but it gave me kudos, you know. It gave me kind of like, okay, I've been on top of the pops now. That's kind of, it was like a rite of passage, like being on the cover of the New Musical Express, or doing an American tour, or you know, doing a headline show at Hammersmith Odeon. It's one of those things that you chalk off, and it has lasting impact. Literally, as I came into to here, I'm in the loft of my over my garage talking to you at the moment, and as I told you, we got the builders in, and one of the builders said to me, "I saw you on telly over the weekend." I was like, "Oh, what was that then?" And he explained what he'd seen, and it was clearly a Top of the Pops rerun of Between the Wars. And he was talking about it and me playing. When he said, "Oh, you playing when you're playing live?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, that'll be Top of the Pops." So it's even after all this time, people still talk about it, and I am very very proud about it, because particularly where it was, because what you don't get is the context of the entire year before that had been the miners' strike in the UK, and that was probably the most contentious social conflict of the 1980s, and it involved everybody, and you couldn't escape from it. And it was class war. I mean, it was class war of the most terrible kind. And so to bring some of that into Top of the Pops, which was fundamentally about escapism, because that's what pop music is about. I'm not complaining about it. It's a strange it's a strange industry to try and make political work in, but that's what it is. That's what I do. So to bring some of that into, but here's the thing. This will make you smile, Logan, about the record industry. I wrote Between the Wars in 1984 during the strike, but by the time the record industry had recorded it, printed it up and distributed it, the strike had ended. Whereas today, if I'd started doing it, I'd be able to put it straight onto YouTube like I do with a song now.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it makes sense, that difference. I know we were talking about in the pre-interview the difference between the music industry back then and now. It's very interesting, but it's funny now, still 40 years on from that track, it's still so impactful and it really resonates with people. Um, and also, speaking of resonating records, I mean, you by this stage of the record that I'd like to talk about now, you had released a mini album, other studio albums, a double album. I'd love to talk about William Bloke,
Yeah,
which is my second favorite album in your discography.
thank you.
Life's a Riot being my personal
Of course.
favorite. But I really love William Bloke. It'd actually probably be tied for first, actually.
What do
Now
you
that I'm
love
thinking
about
about
it,
it, it's
Logan?
well, I remember reading about it before we had this conversation, and I saw it was quite, somebody described it as very personal and a bit spiritual, and I knew you always did social commentary and political views, so I was kind of curious going, what does this album sound like? And I was putting it on, listening to songs like From Red to Blue, and I loved Upfield. I thought that was really, really energetic, and same with Goal Hanger, the closer. I just found it to be a really fun album while still maintaining your sound, that you really tried something different that I
Thank you.
thoroughly
Thank you.
enjoyed on
I
that
mean, one of the
record.
problems I have as being Billy Bragg is everyone thinks they know what I'm going to be. I'm going to be political and serious, and people come to my gigs and find me, you know, cracking jokes and writing, singing songs about relationships and you know, and vulnerability, and it's a completely different experience for them. So I have to work hard to go against the way that people think I am.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, who's while researching, listening to Life's a Riot and brewing up with Billy Bragg and talking with the Taxman about poetry, all three would be considered political records. It was so cool for me as a fan to discover this completely different side of you on this record. So, and obviously this was a completely very important time of your life. There was a lot of changes in your life at this time. So I'd like to ask you, what was the writing process like for you, writing these different tracks? Me curious as someone who's interested
Yeah,
in
yeah.
songwriting and loving this
Well,
album.
obviously, you know what had happened by the time I came to make William Bloke. A number of huge things had happened. Firstly, the Soviet Union had disappeared. The Cold War had ended. Margaret Thatcher had been deposed, and I become someone's dad. Now, probably any one of those three things, I would probably have to change the way that I wrote and made records. But all three of them coming in a period of 3 years really challenged me. And I did wonder to start with, would I still be able to be inspired in the way that I was when I was, Cold War, miners' strike, single man, having loads of relationships, but actually it's not really about those things. It's really about reflecting on where you are now and how you feel at the moment, rather than, going back and writing those songs again. And people say to me sometimes, why didn't you write another song like Between the Wars? And I'm like, well, we don't live in a Margaret Thatcher time anymore. We live in a completely different time. So the process was strange, and it did take me, obviously, when you become a parent, it does fill up all of your time if you can be hands-on, and I like to be hands-on. So I did wonder if I would still be able to record songs. But I had a John Peel session coming up, and I needed a new song and a couple of new songs for it. And the night before, I wrote Brickbat, which is one of my favourite songs of all my songs, about the baby in the bathroom, listening to the sound of the sea. And from there on, I realised that this would be just as inspirational. Inspiration would be coming from a different place.
Yeah, and I think that's it for me though. As an interviewer, my job is to research the guest and try to get insight into their life. And the amount of bios that come up, and they're all great because they give you facts. But regarding music, it's not really about facts. It's about getting to know the musician. So for me, as a researcher as well as the interviewer, this is like a little bit of a snapshot into your life. That this in itself is one of the most interesting and important parts of my research.
Yeah.
So I just think for anybody who's listening, that's why I really love this album so much, because you're a musician who I love. So it's great to get insight into the music that I love and what the time was like for you. And I'd like to speak to you about something very, very interesting. And before I do actually ask you about it, I take music in school, and inside my music book, I was looking through things, and they sometimes give song examples and song studies. And if we wouldn't do them, I check through them because sometimes they can be really, really interesting and obscure. And I'm a big fan of some of that stuff. And I found 433 by John Cage. And I just went, although I understand, like, some people might not enjoy it, I loved the concept. Yeah. Immediately I just went, that is fantastic. Now, most people are kind of going, John Cage, Billy Bragg, 4 minutes, 33 seconds of silence, or a New England. Pretty different stuff we're talking about here. So, how do we link this up? Cage Against the Machine was a version of 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Your version of John Cage's classic. So I'd like to ask, how did you get involved with Cage Against the Machine?
I should say that I didn't play on that track, but I am on the chorus. You can hear me being silent on the chorus of that. And well, it was basically, there was a lot of fundraising records that were out and about at the time. And I think Tom Morello was part of it. He's a mate of mine. He probably wrote me into it, I should imagine. But yeah, Cage, it's a great idea, isn't it? 433.
It's magnificent.
Yeah. And particularly in an age where we're, trying to go 4 minutes and 33 seconds without checking your smartphone. I think most people would find that hard. I was reading a thing today where they were doing an experiment trying to get people to sit still for 15 minutes and not need some attention. And the way to end the process was to press a buzzer that gave them an electric shock. So they would rather have an electric shock than not have their iPhones. One guy pressed this thing 99 times to give himself an electric shock so he could end the thing. He was so bored. So that's, exactly. So
that's fascinating.
It is scary. It's scary. And I'm as guilty.
And as someone who's growing up with smartphones, like in circulation with people my age, I'm kind of going like, you can see the attention spans in people growing shorter.
It's crazy. So 433, I think, becomes more portentous as time goes on. Really, it becomes its stature grows. and the challenge of being able to sit still for that amount of time. Maybe sitting still will be something at the Olympics in years to come.
Who knows, with all the kind of stimuli that we're getting
Yeah,
from social media and different things. I find it though very interesting. For me, I put in my headphones and I put on 433 just to see, will I hear like the piano lid opening and closing, or do they have audience noise? And I discovered it literally is just
yeah,
silence. And I was going, sure, I can't listen to them. But then I thought, no, that's the
that's the
point.
point.
I'm meant to just
Exactly.
listen to what's around
Yep.
me. That is the concept. And I was just kind of going, it's such a great concept. And I loved discovering that Cage Against the Machine. And there was a remix that I personally loved, which was a musician watching Family Guy on mute
Oh,
remix,
that's great.
which to
I mean, who hasn't done that?
that
Who hasn't
just,
done that? Let's be honest.
I mean,
You know,
there must be subtitles on or something. I mean, that just, looking at that on the track list, I was just like, okay
yeah,
then.
yeah,
But speaking of the miners' strike that we were
yeah,
discussing, Still Suitable for Miners was re-released in 2018 for its 20th
yeah.
anniversary. I'd love to ask you how you kind of were going reflecting from 1998 and then and then returning back to it in 2018, because it's a really big
Yeah.
project as a book. So
Well, I was really fortunate with Andrew Collins because he's a great writer, and he kind of got into the minutiae of my life at a time when we were moving house from London down to Dorset. So he was there for all the boxes to be opened and all the rubbish to fall out, all the stuff I had to go and collect from my mum's house in Barking. He came along with me on all that, so he got a really deep insights into the sort of story, the Billy Bragg story. And he just made me sound really interesting. Everybody should be so fortunate to have a biographer like Andrew Collins.
that's really well. Obviously, you are really
You're
interesting,
kind to
Billy.
say
I
that,
don't know.
Logan. Thank you, mate.
I don't know what you're talking about, first of all, but also I just think it is very important to have a good biographer to capture that really, really interesting time, especially when you've had such an eventful life, Billy, with all your music and your collaborations as
Yeah,
well. And that over the last maybe 6 7 years, that's not the only thing you've revisited. With the massive project happening in 2023 and 2024 was the Roaring
yeah.
Forty, released on triple vinyl, one vinyl, two CD, as well as your standard CD. You really gave it the works, as well as this. But wasn't there a massive 14
14
CD box set?
CD box set, mate. I mean, the thing is, that it was a great project, right? And there was loads of people working on it, working on the tracks, working on the photographs, working on the credits. But the problem was, there's only one person who's working for the Billy Bragg organisation who was there back in the day and who's still there now, and of course that's me. So every time they had something they didn't know, who's this, and who played what on here, and where was this recorded? It was me having to go and try and suss out and look in my diaries and old sort of notebooks and stuff and try and work out what was going on and where and when. And that's the kind of weird experience to go back and reflect on all that. But I thought it worked out really well. And on a long trip, I had to go to America to speak at a memorial event for a dear friend of mine, Gary Smith, who's Jack's godfather. And it was a long old journey, fly to Boston, drive for 2 hours, drive back. Actually got a train back to New York. And over that long weekend, I listened to every track on the 14 CD compilation. I'm glad I did, because one track was completely the wrong track. And I couldn't understand how someone could make that mistake. But what the guy who compiled it, who did an incredible job, but he obviously, as a point of reference, was switching between Discogs and Spotify. And although Discogs is pretty much on the money, Spotify isn't. There are some tracks on Spotify that are completely the wrong track. Whoever uploaded them, but the problem then is Spotify becomes reality. This is what Billy Bragg's tracks are. These are the Billy Bragg tracks. One of my tracks was just white noise, not any of the one that we put on the compilation tracks. But that track I'm talking about was the right song, but the wrong mix. Very important, very important to me because it was a favourite mix of mine that I wanted to have on there. So I'm glad I listened to it and it didn't go out wrong. But yeah, one of my tracks was just you listen to it and it's just white noise. So you can't really trust. The problem with Spotify, Logan, is it's been put together by millennials. You know what
Yeah.
they're like. You know what they're like. We can't trust them, can we?
I don't
We
judge.
can't
I'm
trust them,
objective.
mate.
I'm
We
not
can't trust
judging.
them. We can't trust them. They don't
If
know.
there's any millennials listening, I'm objective. Don't unsubscribe,
I trust the Gen
please.
Zs. I trust the Gen Zs are going to save us from all this. That's my hope.
I mean, I don't know. I am part of a pretty strange generation. I mean, but look, hopefully we will. If anybody's watching this in the future and my generation hasn't saved us all, I
Yeah,
apologize on behalf of the
we do
generation.
our best,
But who
Logan. We do
knows?
our best, mate. I thought my generation was going to change the world too. We do our best. We're only human.
Exactly. And I think that is something that we all need to remember sometimes. But who knows, that white noise on the Roaring 40 could have been like a demo for Cage Against the
Yeah,
Machine
that's what I
mixes. Who
thought. Yeah,
knows?
or
Like,
my noise
yeah,
album, which is just where me making noises. That would be great,
yeah, I
wouldn't it?
mean, you did do a field recordings album.
Sorry?
There's a lot more to Billy Bragg than you think, guys, who's ever listening. Like, we got field
He's got,
recordings. We
he's
have
making he's
4
making a
minutes
noise
33 of
album. Here we go. He's
silence.
making a noise album.
Uh, oh, God. But the one thing that I will say is that the fact that you've rooted back into your
Yeah.
diaries and found all piece of paper only makes me admire you more,
Mate, I
Billy.
tell you, I've got
Um,
so many of them. It's really annoying because when we go on tour, we get a tour book, right? An itinerary, which we refer to as euphemistically as the Book of Lies or the itinerary. Sometimes we call it the itinerary, but it gives you something to look at every day. And to, I always get them to put a long list of the dates in the front page, and I always mark the halfway point and I work towards that. If you look to try and work towards the last day, because the reason I'm doing this, listeners, is that when I was young and single and carefree, touring was great. But when you're away from your family, when you've got kids and everything, it's not hard. I'm not complaining about it, but it can be emotionally tough, you know. So having the midpoint to work towards is really important. And also you can make notes in there, who's coming to which gig or stuff like that. But most importantly of all, you put it in a big box with all the other itineraries and you can go back 20 years later and see where you played. And I don't see anywhere else where you can do that. But now my tour managers all have it on a bloody app. There's a band app that they all put everything on, and I'm like, mate, I'm not doing that. I want it. I want it physical. I'm old school. I want it. So they grudgingly make me a make me a book I can carry with me. But it's absolutely crucial for knowing. I mean, I've got a book coming out later this year, which is basically fan memories. People, writing in about when they saw me play live. There's like 700 contributions, and I've made 50. I've made
wow.
50 contributions as well. But one of the things we wanted to do was put in a gigography of all the gigs I've played, and I had to go and find these itineraries and go through them and make notes. Some of them we still don't know exactly where I was playing, where it was. There's always a few of them you're not going to get, but generally we've got most of them. We've got them down to the right gig and the right day and the right place. And I'm all right. Call me a completist if you like, but I think these things are important.
Yeah, I can just imagine though you like taking out these boxes of itineraries and just like like the first one it's okay, but by the third box you're just like crying, going, "Oh God,
It
so
wasn't that
many."
so much. It was
Just
putting them in years. That was the problem because they're all jumping up in a
oh
box, and I've got
yeah,
to get them in chronological order, so they're all over the kitchen table, all dusty, and my partner's complaining about it, and I'm like, oh, I'm nearly there. I'm just getting past 1997. Hang on. And it'd be like, because there's other things. There's online resources as well. There's Setlist FM but they have not got everything there either. They're a bit like Spotify. They have big holes in it. So
yeah.
it's out there.
I mean, I think that's why a lot of community run databases like we were mentioning Discogs and Maybe Wikipedia, not so much, but Fandom Wiki. I was going like, when was that John Peel show? When I was researching the one where Milkman of Human Kindness was played at 33 and then
Yeah,
45 revolutions per minute. And I looked, and the person had the
yeah.
exact date. I was going like, where did you find that? That the amount of information that's been put up there through fans, it's amazing. And for me, who is a fan, it's great to have access to a
But who else
community.
is going to do that? Who
Um,
else is going to do that, Logan, and care about that minutiae of Peel or Billy Bragg or Logan? You know, who's going to come along years time and log all of your shows? Who's going to do that other than someone who really loves what you did and really feels that it's significant to them? And that's the thing about music. I think it has a significance to you that may not be matched by those around you, but that significance is something that stays with you over through decades. You know, there are songs that I might be in a supermarket and a song come on from my teenage years, and it takes me right back to the school disco or to, being out with my mates or stuff like that. I think music has a way of doing that, and if you translate that into fandom, that feeling into fandom, I think it really is something that people. It's a labour of love. Those people who put those wikis together, and I try and
yeah,
keep what I do as a labour of love as well, and not as a boring old day job.
same with me. Like, I mean, the reason why I started Logan Sounds Off was there weren't many people in my class talking about Black
Yeah,
Sabbath and getting into music. But now I've gone to the stage where people are getting onto Black Sabbath, but I've gone into different stuff as well, like Miles Davis and Sun Ra and people like that,
steady
who
on,
kids in
Logan.
my
Steady
class.
on, mate. You've got a long way to go. You're only 13. Just pace yourself. Work your way up. Don't go straight up there. There's not much beyond Sun Ra. Once
But
you get past Sun Ra, it's kind of gets really
yeah,
weird.
but I'm thoroughly
Yeah, it
enjoying
is great.
kind of now. I was on Discogs actually, and speaking of the fandom, Kaya Bram with Kisses XX. I was telling you the preamble of the interview came out for Record Store Day. And I was inputting it into my collection, and I was the first one to kind of look for it on Discogs, or the first one to want to add the release. So I added the release. I was telling you it was my first time, but I came back to it, and it was funny. I saw people selling their
Yeah,
copies on it, and like contributors
yeah.
and different things and things that I had put up, and I didn't put up any images, but somebody else put up images, and it's really interesting. What I found in common with some people who were selling online was one person was also into Sun
There
Ra.
you go.
That like I wasn't messaging them, but I saw that they had added stray voltage into their collection, and I find that really really cool, that those
It is
connections
cool.
that
It is cool. And I tell you why it's cool, because I hate to use this phrase, but in the old days, you would need to go into a record shop and have someone who knew music make that connection for you when you were buying the record. They might say, you might be buying a record, they might say, have you heard Sun Ra? And you might like be, no. That's how I heard Bob Dylan. I had a job in a hardware store which had a record shop downstairs, same shop. And I used to spend my lunch hour, I was a Saturday boy, spend my lunch hour sitting in. There used to be a little booth, a closed room that you could sit in and listen to records. If you wanted to buy a record in the old days, they would have a listening booth in a record shop, and I would have my lunch in there. And one day they knew that I was into Simon and Garfunkel, so they put on Bob Dylan, Volume One of Bob Dylan's greatest hits, for me to listen to. And I was like, "Wow, who's this?" What? Because I didn't have an older brother. So I only would hear what was on the radio. And hearing Bob Dylan's greatest hits, hearing Blowing in the Wind, hearing The Times Are Changing, and these amazing songs. If you don't have someone who helps you out a little bit like that, it's possible to kind of get stuck. So I'm really glad to hear that Discogs has done that function for you to help you to extend the ways, recommendations of other things to listen to.
yeah, well, it's just, if anybody isn't on Discogs, check it out. And if you're not following me, how dare you? But not only that, try following me, because I'm going to be sharing my Discogs online pretty soon. Once I have all the records catalogued, and some of you know I have a pretty big CD collection sent to me, for some from Gilded ALM, some I bought myself, some from my dad, and I have a cassette collection as well, and I'm currently grinding through all of those, finding the presents. So once I finish that, I'm going to be sharing my Discogs. So give me a follow on Discogs, and hopefully we'll be able to share collections. But the one thing that I actually would love to ask you about, because it's what brought this into you together, Billy, on what's coming up in Ireland is Forest Fest, and you're going to be playing a Forest Fest. And for any festival goers or people who are considering going to the show or are big fans, could you tell us, without giving away too much, what's going to be coming up at the show and what can they expect?
Well, I'll be coming over with my summer touring outfit, which is myself and a keyboard player who also sings a bit of vocals, and a guy who plays pedal steel guitar and Johnny Marr style 12-string guitar, and we'll be doing my my fabulous festival set, which we're about to do our first show on Friday this week, and then of course Glastonbury is coming up, and by the time we get to County Laois, we'll be up to speed. I think we'll be. It's towards the end of our summer, so I should be firing on all cylinders by the time I see you.
That's really, really. I'd say though, for anybody who is going to the gig, I'd say it's going to be amazing. I honestly though, regarding live shows and those festivals, like we were saying with Discogs, it's a great way to see new music. Because I've only been to one festival that was actually done over in my town, but it ended up not going on this year. But it was really, really interesting to meet these different musicians and see them. So hopefully, if you're at Forest Fest, definitely check out Billy Bragg. Or if you don't know his music and you just happen to be a massive fan of Logan Sounds Off, I know you are, and you clicked on this interview, all Billy Bragg's social media and music links will be down below, especially Bandcamp. Make sure to support your artists, guys. And before we finish up, Billy, I have a very fun question for me. Sometimes it's fun for the interviewee, occasionally. Do you have any music recommendations?
Yes, I do, yeah. A guy named Jesse Wells. Jesse, Jesse, Wells, Wells. He's an American singer-songwriter. He posts on Instagram. He plays a boxy sounding acoustic guitar, cheap looking acoustic guitar. He stands somewhere in a forest somewhere in the United States of America, and his songs are all political and they're really good. He's kind of got the spirit of Woody Guthrie. He just this weekend, the weekend before we recorded this interview, was the big No Kings demonstrations against Donald Trump. Trump was having his big parade with the army. And Jesse wrote a great song called No Kings just for that. He's writing topical songs all the time. And I keep my eye on him. He's really, really interesting. And I would encourage, and again, his songs are really simple. They're, 3-chord songs. They're not complicated. They're just one guy, 3 chords and the truth. And to me, that's, the most powerful way to experience music. And I don't even know if he's put a record out. I mean, I should imagine he has by now, but I'm just riffing on his Instagram postings, and I think you'd be encouraged to any songwriter who's thinking about writing to check out Jesse and see how he puts his arguments together and get out there. And because he's writing topical songs, people are coming back to hear what he's saying now. Instead of just writing songs, he's writing songs in the moment, and music has the ability to do that, not to change things. Jesse's music, my music, they're not going to change the world by singing these songs, but they will make you feel as if you're not the only person who feels that way. And that's an important power that music has. So, check him out.
Link will be down below to see that, guys. That's a great recommendation, Billy, and actually really resonates with the conversation that we've been having. And that was my final question. So, Billy, I want to thank you so much for joining me here. It was great to chat to you. I really enjoyed having the conversation. You were great.
Thank you very much, Logan. And I do apologise again to any of your listeners who heard any extraneous noise. We've got the builders in at the moment. The roofers have just come and put a load of tiles up on the roof with some loud machine. And so if you hear any rumbling in the background, just put it down to some kind of John Cale noise record that me and Logan are making on the sly. And we'll leave it at that.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
That one, yeah. Well, thanks so much, Billy.
My pleasure, mate.
God almighty. But thanks so much, Billy. Great to see you. Great to chat to you about music. I'll definitely check out your recommendation, and you should too, guys. Make sure to follow Billy on all social media. Links will be down below. And if you're feeling extra kind today, do check out my social media pages. It does support a lot. Buy some of Billy's music on Bandcamp. Support the artists, guys. It makes a huge difference. And also try out Discogs, especially if you happen to be a younger listener and you're really into music. Check out Discogs. You can find some really interesting records there, and you can build up your collection and stuff. But thank you so much, Billy. It's been great to chat to you. Make sure to see Billy at Forest Fest, guys, and check out his recommendation and the Roaring 40. Out now on 14 CD box set.
Nice one, Logan. Thanks very much for having me on. Really enjoyed chatting with you, mate. And yeah,
really enjoyed chatting with you
I'll
too.
maybe see you next time I'm over.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, mate. Billy.
Bye.
Bye.